And happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to the weekend edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. I am Gil Martin, and with me, as always, every Friday is Rachel Donner. And happy Friday, Rachel.
Happy Friday.
We made it through another week, and, it's a little, I don't know what the right word is. It's hard to believe that, after this weekend, we may not have any live NHL games for a few months now.
Could be. It could either end tonight or on Sunday.
Or we go to game 7 if the Lightning suddenly find themselves quickly enough to extend the series. And certainly I thought this series was going to go 7 games. Doesn't look like that's likely, but I've learned over the last few years not to count out the Lightning anytime soon.
Absolutely. They have come back from elimination several times this year alone. So I think that anything is still possible in this series. But man, it kind of looks like we're heading for an Avalanche Cup.
Does look that way. Before I forget, want to thank everyone for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Now, Rachel, we've got a lot to discuss, but let's start with the controversy surrounding Game 4 in Tampa. Nazem Kadri getting the game winner 12 minutes, 2 seconds into overtime. But how many men were on the ice, and should that goal have counted? Your thoughts about what happened on Wednesday?
It absolutely should have counted. I don't know what they were complaining about. It was just one of those like weird middle ground things, and there was no effect on the play. And yeah, I think that especially for Tampa to complain about too many men on the ice is a little questionable. I mean, obviously, the rules are the rules, but at the same time, I just think that it was very clearly a goal, and we can all move on from that.
What is it that the Avalanche are doing so well in your mind that is causing them to control the pace and tempo of the series?
I think it's several things. Number one, I think that they're just so structurally sound that even when I think Tampa is playing at their best, Colorado does not panic. It's just something that they don't do. And you especially noticed it in the overtime of Game 4. I would say that it was a pretty dominant period by the Avalanche leading up to the Kadri goal. I think that they had many more shots on goal. They controlled the pace of play. And despite the fact that that game had started with a very quick Tampa Bay Lightning goal, that it just did not faze them at all at any point, later in the game. And I feel like there are so many chances that Tampa could have changed momentum, and they just couldn't, because Colorado is like, yeah, we can figure this out. We got this. And I think it was just as simple as that. It's the confidence plus the structure.
They really do seem to be on top of their game. And I think one of the things that I noticed, and it definitely surprised me, Tampa Bay does not seem to have an answer for the speed game of the Colorado Avalanche.
Yeah, that is also true. I think that Tampa has gotten a little slower than they were when they won their first cup of the two, and kind of got more physical and in their roster. And Colorado has kind of gone more all in on speed and skill to a larger degree. And I think that that has also affected how this series has played out. And I was definitely one of the people that worried that Colorado hadn't had to fight as hard in the playoffs thus far as Tampa did, and wouldn't have that extra push or that extra fight in them. But clearly they can, and they have.
No question about it. Also, got to give props to Darcy Kemper and the strong play that he provided. 37 saves and 39 shots faced in game 4. And even if he's not necessarily outplaying Andrei Vasilevsky, he's at least equaling him. And, you could argue he's outplaying him, but he's at least playing as well as Vasilevsky. And to the Avalanche's credit, he's probably not seeing as many dangerous opportunities.
That is absolutely true. I think Darcy Kemper makes me exceedingly more nervous than Vasilevsky does.
Agreed.
But I do think that, and I think he gets shaken a little bit more, but I think he's doing enough. And that's all that matters, is that if you're not resting everything on the back of your goaltender, the goaltender just has to do enough. And the rest of the team has to make up for it in terms of defensive structure in front of him and also offensively. And that's what the Avalanche do.
Your thoughts about the game-winning goal by Kadri? At least, he was injured. He had surgery on his thumb, I believe it was. He comes back in his first game and gets the overtime game winner. Your thoughts about that story?
I mean, good for him. I thought it was really funny that they couldn't tell that it was a goal at first because the puck got stuck in the net, but it was very clearly in. And so the sort of delayed celebration was kind of funny. But I think that it's a moment that's good for him. And I'm glad he was able to get back into the series.
Yeah, you don't like seeing some of the better players have to miss a big series like this. And then for Kadri to have an instant impact like that certainly bodes well for him. Nathan MacKinnon, 8 shots on goal for Colorado. He scored 1, but he just really seems to be a force out there offensively for the Avs.
He really does. I think that, obviously there's a lot of options on that team, but Nathan MacKinnon is a guy that's supposed to take charge in these situations, and he's doing that. And so definitely worth the price of admission for Avs fans.
No question. And it has been a fun series to watch. I will say that, with the exception of the blowout game, where unless you were an Avalanche fan, watching a 7-0 game loses its luster after a while. But, all the games thus far have been entertaining and competitive.
I think so too. And I think, we talked about it last week where we said that this was the series that everybody wanted and we were happy to get it. And I think that is still ringing true for me. I think that regardless of how it turns out, and again, I am not, thinking that Colorado has this in the bag. I think that Tampa absolutely has the ability to come back in this series, and should they do that, all the more fun for the rest of us.
Let it go 7 then, huh? Now,
listen,
go ahead. So tonight, which is the next game in the series, we're looking at the Avs with a chance to win their first cup in 21 years and do it in front of their home fans. Obviously, you don't care that much where you win, just that you win. But obviously, it would be sweeter for the Avs fans if they can do it at home.
Oh, sure. That's how, you want it to go, where the home team gets to, enjoy that victory. But at the same time, I think the players don't care where they win. They just want to win, especially when you get to the final.
Absolutely. It may be a little more melodramatic at home, a little more exciting because the fans are celebrating with you, but better to win on the road than not to win at all. No question about that. And Avs fans who have waited 21 years for this moment, I think they'll be just as happy if it happens down in Florida in game 6 as they would if it happens in Colorado. What do the Avalanche have to do in order to win game 5 and send the series back to Tampa?
What does Tampa have to do?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
I think that their big stars have to step up. I think Stamkos really needs to take charge. I think that they just have to show that leadership that has gotten them this far in the first place. And, I think that they probably should try and stay out of the penalty box, although that didn't really hurt them so much. This past game, it was more, 5-on-5 for most of the game. But I do think that maybe they need some depth players to step up in a way that they haven't before. I think it's just a team effort, and to not panic. I think that's the main point there, is that in no way, shape, or form should they be panicked or let the crowd get to them. Just kind of play their game. And I think they'll be okay, honestly.
You mentioned Stamkos, only one shot on goal out of the 39 that his team took. That is not typical of Steven Stamkos.
Correct.
And how about Vasilevsky? I mean, I assume he has to be a little bit better, but his team also has to support him a little bit more.
Yeah, they do. That's what I'm saying. It has to be a full team effort.
All right. Well, we've got a lot more to discuss on today's show. We'll be talking about the off-season calendar and free agency and a lot more. But first, Rachel, why don't you talk to us about Bet Online?
BetOnline.net is your #1 source for all your betting needs and sports information. You can find all the latest sports developments, league review, and news, including this year's NHL Stanley Cup Final and Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to esports and more. And betonline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news all year round. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events like MMA or boxing or golf. So head to their website today or use your mobile device to learn more about all the trends in action. Bet Online, where the game starts.
So let me ask you this before we change the topic. Do we have a sixth game? Your thoughts on whether this series ends tonight or whether we go on to Sunday?
I think we're going to go on to Sunday. That is my educated guess.
I agree with you. I think that's what we're going to see. I think, whether they can come back and win the series, I think Tampa Bay has at least one game where they make one last valiant stand to defend their two-time championships and keep that hope for three-peat alive just a little bit longer.
I think they will.
So let's talk a little bit about the calendar, because the full off season could very well be upon us by the end of this weekend. And if not, certainly by early next week. What do we have on tap once we get into July, which starts this coming week?
Yeah, it's much closer than it feels because we're still playing hockey in the Stanley Cup Final, but the NHL Draft is 2 weeks away. Round 1 is on Thursday the 7th. Round 2 through 7 is on Friday the 8th. And that's not a lot of time. I think, all the latest rankings lists are coming out and people are kind of scrambling to figure out who their team should select versus who they will select. And so there's going to be a lot of, I think, prognostication on that front over the next couple of weeks. So we will be talking about that for sure on Locked On NHL, and we'll have a full draft coverage from Montreal included. But I think that, there's going to be a lot of churn related to that, in addition to, some of the coaching carousel openings that have started to get filled.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting as well. And then free agency, not that far behind.
Definitely not that far behind. It is July 13th is the big day. And that, of course, was pushed later because of the way the schedule was this year. And I think that free agency this year is going to be especially important because, according to what we just learned, this is sort of the last year of a more stagnant cap where it only went up $1 million to 82.5 this year. It should go up more in future years. So in terms of free agents and signings and what contracts can look like, teams, I think, will be banking to some degree on having more room in future years, but also having to account for this first year of new contracts with much less money to work with.
Yeah, it's going to be a little tricky, but GMs are going to have to get creative. And somehow, the better teams, when I say better, the better run teams, they find a way to fit players under the cap, to create cap space, whether it's through trades or LTIR or letting people go or stashing them in the minors. The well-run teams find a way to fit the players they need under the cap somehow.
Yeah, it's really tight, and I think that there's going to be a lot of teams struggling with their cap management. There's going to be some teams struggling to get to the cap floor, as always, with our usual suspects. So that was one thing I really did wish they raised the cap floor a little bit and make it a little harder on those teams, but and not make them dumping grounds and draft pick farms. But I think that it is something that I think requires sort of a new kind of GM and a new kind of hockey operations management. And there are some teams I think that still kind of operate in an old school mentality, whereas others are more adept at dealing with this. And I think this year's free agency is going to show a lot of that, because I think there's going to have to be a lot of trades for teams to create cap space in order to make things work. So yeah, this summer, I think all said and done is going to be very fascinating in the NHL.
Going to be eventful. I agree. And I think on draft day, we're going to see a lot of movement, a lot of trades involving picks, involving contracts, and people assuming cap space. And that will certainly make things interesting for us because we'll have lots to talk about.
Yes, that is absolutely true.
Who are some of the names that you're looking at when free agency gets underway next month?
For this year?
Yeah.
I mean, for this year's free agency, I think Kadri is a huge name. Johnny Gaudreau is the huge other big name, I think. And of course, I'm thinking about it from a Flyers perspective and who they might be trying to get. And not saying I necessarily want that to happen. I'm just saying that that is something, that has been talked about, certainly in many circles. But I think those are like the two biggest names.
Claude Giroux, obviously, someone you followed for many, many years. Your thoughts as to where he might end up?
Honestly, could not tell you. And I don't care. I mean, I do because I want him to be happy, but I think that, he's moved on and he made a choice that Florida was where he wanted to go, and didn't work out this playoffs, but he seems to like it there. So maybe he'll resign if they have enough room, but they've got a new coach there. So we'll see about that. I just think that, there's several options for him, and he will pursue whatever he thinks will do him best.
Would it be more upsetting to you if he signed with another Metropolitan Division team?
Oh, for sure. For sure. I mean, I'm not sure I see that happening, but I suppose anything's possible. And it's happened before. Like, I've been through this before. If it was like going through this with Eric Lindros, I think I would be more upset about it, but I've kind of been through this circus already. And so it's the nature of the business. I think like everything that I was like feeling about him leaving the Flyers already has been processed.
Yeah, I would say that is understandable, and it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see where he ends up. 34 years old. This is probably his last chance to sign that, relatively long-term big contract. And does he value the most money? Does he value trying to win a cup? That all remains to be seen. But some other big names out there this year. You've got Evgeny Malkin yet to re-sign with Pittsburgh. PK Subban is out there. Patrick Laine, Chris Letang, Marc-Andre Fleury. So there's a lot of names out there, well-known players who either maybe a little past their prime or could help a lot of teams, maybe a little of both.
Could be. I think Malkin is a very interesting player on that list, just because he's been such an indelible part of the Pittsburgh Penguins for so long, but there does seem to be a substantial chance that he could be leaving, which doesn't seem possible. But I think that, Letang is going to be the priority for Pittsburgh between the two. And he's more likely to continue to play in Pittsburgh, and Malkin may be sort of the sacrificial lamb in all of this. But then again, Sidney Crosby may have a word about that. So, is Malkin going to be willing to take a huge pay cut in order to stay there? I don't know.
Well, we'll find out in the next few weeks, most likely, as free agency is just around the corner. We've got more to discuss on today's Locked On NHL podcast, including an interesting signing in Boston and some news from around the league. So more to come on the Locked On NHL podcast. So, Rachel, news out of Boston, Patrice Bergeron staying with the Bruins, the 36-year-old. Looks like he's going to sign a 1-year deal for one more go round with the Bruins. He's their captain, their spiritual leader, been there for a while. Your thoughts on that decision?
I think for me, the biggest effect that has is that it makes Pastrnak more likely to stay. And that kind of gives that team a little bit more heft than maybe we would have expected, because it kind of felt like the Bruins were falling apart at the seams, firing the coach, and weren't sure about Bergeron and all of it. And were they going to trade Pastrnak and all of this? And so I think that adds some stability to what seemed like a very big offseason of upheaval.
Yeah, and I think if you're the Boston Bruins, you really want to have that stability to sort of transition. I mean, there are some older players on this roster, but the Bruins were still a contending team this year. And, to keep your captain and the guy who has been your leader and with this team for so long is important for the Boston Bruins at this stage of their rebuilding state, or at this stage of their development. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I'm not sure what state the Bruins are in, honestly.
Yeah, I don't know if I am either.
Are they rebuilding? Are they not rebuilding? Are they doing one more thing? Trying to make this work one more time. I don't know. It's hard to tell from day to day, honestly.
It truly is. What did you think of Coach Cooper and his reaction to the controversy that we saw on Wednesday night
about the
game-winning goal?
The game-winning goal?
Yeah.
I honestly, it doesn't matter to me. It's a goal.
Right.
So he can talk all he wants. I think that, it's his job to advocate for his team, and that's what he was doing. Right. I think to a large degree, but what he had to say was kind of neither here nor there, ultimately.
Yeah, it was sort of, sort of walking that line. I think he was trying to support his team without getting fined. I think that was more or less the line he was trying to walk.
There is that too.
But, the other question, I guess, is emotionally. Losing in overtime is always emotionally difficult. And, I figure if any team can bounce back from that stunning emotional loss, the Lightning have got to be near the top of that list.
Oh, 100%. 100%. That's why I think it'll go to at least a game 6.
Yeah. And I am looking forward to it. I really believe that, there is a lot of entertaining hockey to be played in this series, and I'm enjoying it. I mean, just the quality of play has been very high. And, coming into the series, we all said, okay, these are probably the two best teams we could get. And I think with the exception of the one blowout game, that the series has delivered on that high level of play that we expected.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
So should be a very interesting weekend, and possibly the last weekend of the 2021-2022 NHL season. And I'm not ready. I'm not ready to say no more hockey games that count until October.
Yeah, October 11th. Can't wait.
Not that we're counting or anything. No, not us. Yeah.
I know. I'm eagerly awaiting the first is it October yet hashtag.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Only hockey fans. You got to love it. Yeah, absolutely got to love it. Rachel, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I mean, I can't believe that this could be it, and that next week we will be in the full throes of the off season by the time we reunite to talk.
Yeah, I mean, even if it goes 7 by next Friday when we reconvene here, this series will be over. So this is definitely the last show we have while this Stanley Cup Final is being played. But looking forward to whatever remaining games we have, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 more to go. Should be some entertaining hockey. So that's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. Rachel, you can follow her on Twitter at @rmiriam. You can follow me, Gil Martin, on Twitter at Ice Wars NYR VSNYI. And I will be back on Monday with possibly discussing the end of the Stanley Cup Final series, but certainly covering that from all angles and the latest on coaching changes and news from around the NHL. So make sure you join us for that. Have a great weekend, everybody. And thanks again for listening to the Locked On NHL podcast.